This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
PHIVOLCS, or the Philippine Seismological Agency, called for the evacuation of thousands of people from homes near a volcano south of Manila after an eruption sent steam and rock fragments hundreds of meters into the sky.
Dozens of fires raged across Western Canada and California, with little relief expected from a deadly heat wave that has seen temperatures hit record highs.
And tens of millions of people in India were suffering under a severe heat wave that has pushed the temperature to a 9-year high in Delhi as monsoon rains run behind schedule.
And a barrier-breaking woman aviator, Wally Funk, 82 years old, will join Jeff Bezos this month on the first crewed space flight for the billionaire's company Blue Origin, the firm announced yesterday.
First, here in the country, the Philippine Seismological Agency called for the evacuation of thousands of people from homes near the Taal volcano south of Manila after an eruption sent steam and rock fragments hundreds of meters into the sky. The Taal volcano, which sits in a picturesque lake, has been belching sulfur dioxide for several days now, creating a thick haze over the capital and several surrounding provinces and prompting health warnings. Let's listen in.
Kung bawat alerto ang ating pag-uusapan, pareho. Kaya lang ang pagkakaiba noong January 12, 2020 ay tuloy-tuloy ang mga pagsabog at nag-escalate hanggang talagang lumaki. Ito naman po ay pasulpot-sulpot at ang ating pinaka-panganib na binabantayan ay within Taal Volcano at doon sa loob ng 7 kilometers away from the main crater. So hanggang doon lang po tayo nagrekomenda na bawal pumasok ang mga tao, di kaya ay mag-evacuate doon sa mga lugar na may mga naninirahan. Sumasabog na po ang bulkan, pero yung mga pagsabog niya ay maliliit lamang. Meron po tayong 5 mga explosion, pero ang pinakamalaki lang 1 kilometro, and then yung 4 ay hanggang 200 metro lamang. Alert level 3 pa lang naman tayo. Yung talagang mas delikadong pagsabog ay mas mataas ang posibilidad kung nagtaas tayo ng alert level 4. Kaya yung evacuation po natin ay restricted lang doon sa 5 barangay. 4 na barangay and partly ng 1 barangay doon sa Agoncillo at Laurel. So hindi naman po buong paligid ng Taal Volcano ang may paglikas. Meron po tayong na-record kahapon na 28 volcanic earthquakes. Pero hindi naman po ito nararamdaman ng mga tao. Ibig sabihin, hindi pa ganun ka-intensified ang aktibidad ng Taal. Actually, magmula po kagabi, bandang alas 8 hanggang ngayon, makikita po natin na merong lumalabas na usok sa main crater ng Taal. Ito po sanhi ng pag-akyat ng gas at water vapor. Kaya po kapansin-pansin na tuloy-tuloy ito. Importante po na maging maingat ang mga tao kahit po hindi nila nararamdaman yung paglindol, ay meron pong nangyayari dyan sa Volcano Island. Matagal na po nating pinagtutuunan ng pansin ang aktibidad ng Bulkang Taal. Naglagay po tayo ng marami ng instrumento sa paligid. Meron po tayong team na titingnan kung makakapalipad tayo ng drone at lumapit sa crater para matingnan talaga kung ano ang nangyayari. At siyempre, patuloy tayo nakikipag-ugnayan sa kinaukulan, lalong-lalo na ang provincial government ng Batangas na siya ang namumuno pagdating sa disaster risk reduction and management diyan sa probinsya ng Batangas. Sa ating mga kababayan, meron po tayong mga mapa na available sa Hazard Hunter PH. Gamit ang inyong phone para masigurado ninyo kung ano ang mga lugar na posibleng maapektuhan kung sakaling magkaroon ng mas malaki pang aktibidad ang bulkan. Meron pong pangilan-ngilan na mga volcanic earthquakes magmula po kaninang alas 5 ng umaga hanggang ngayon, no, ay mga 16 at patuloy po ang pagbuga ng usok na may kasamang gas. Wala naman po mga pagsabog na naulit magmula kagabi. Siyempre sa panahon ng COVID pandemic, napaka-importante, napakahalaga na yung minimum health standards o protocol ay maobserba sa pag-evacuate lamang at doon mismo sa evacuation area para naman mas maging ligtas ang ating mga kabayan sa COVID-19. Pero equally important po, mahalaga din na maging safe ang ating mga kababayan pagdating sa mga volcanic hazard na pwedeng mangyari kung sakaling tumindi pa ang kondisyon ng Taal Volcano. At ito po ay marapat na kanilang pag-isipan ng mabuti kasi ang mga pagsabog ng Taal, maliit lang kahapon, kung sakaling lumaki, ay pwede na pong maapektuhan ang mas malayong lugar. No? Sana hindi matuloy ang mas malalakas pang mga pagsabog, pero nandyan pa rin yung banta na pinapakita ng Taal kasi marami pang gas na inilalabas.
Now, the last eruption in January last year shot ash 15 kilometers or 9 miles high and spewed red-hot lava, crushing scores of homes, killing livestock, and sending over 135,000 people into shelters. Taal burst to life again Thursday afternoon with a short-lived dark phreatomagmatic plume that rose a kilometer into the air, according to PHIVOX in a statement. Now, that was followed by 4 short phreatomagmatic bursts that produced 200-meter high plumes above the main crater lake. It said in a later update, the agency is warning of ongoing magmatic extrusion at the main crater that may further drive succeeding explosions as it raised the alert level from 2 to 3. Taal is one of the most active volcanoes in a nation hit periodically by eruptions and earthquakes due to its location on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone of intense seismic activity. Access to the volcano island, which was once home to a community of thousands, has been prohibited since last year.
The National Disaster Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, and its counterpart in Calabarzon are closely monitoring the situation in the region after the phreatomagmatic bursts in Taal Volcano and raising of alert level 3 yesterday. In its 8 a.m. Taal Volcano Bulletin today, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOX, recorded 4 short phreatomagmatic eruptions. Calabarzon Regional DRRMC has been coordinating with the mayors of affected areas in Batangas for resource augmentation for response operations if the volcano unrest remains. The affected residents include those in the areas of Poblacion and Sinturisan in San Nicolas, Gulod, Buso-Buso, Bugaan West and Bugaan East in Laurel, Subic Ilaya, Banyaga, and Bilibinwang in Agoncillo, Apacay, Taal, Luyos, and Buot in Tanawan City, and San Sebastian, Balete. There were already 345 affected families, or 1,392 individuals, as of 3 p.m. today. A total of 317 families, or 1,282 individuals, are being served inside 11 evacuation centers, while 28 families, or 110 individuals, are outside evacuation centers, or those who stayed with their relatives and friends. Regional offices of government agencies and uniformed services in Calabarzon have also implemented measures and are in full alert status to provide assistance.
In other news, dozens of fires rage across Western Canada and California today, with little relief expected from a deadly heat wave that has seen temperatures hit record highs. Around 1,000 people were evacuated in Canada's British Columbia province on Thursday when a wildfire burnt down 90% of a small town that had set a national high temperature record for 3 days running. Take a look.
To put it in perspective, both Canada and Oregon set temperature records that are higher than any temperature ever experienced in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is in the middle of the Mojave Desert. So this is truly an unprecedented and exceptional event. Climate change in some way is like steroids for the weather. if there's a famous sports player that performed quite well, then started taking steroids, then their performance, increased beyond what was possible before that. It doesn't mean that they couldn't hit a home run before they took steroids. If we look at baseball, for example, it just means that it makes it more likely than it otherwise would have been. And so climate is sort of steroids for the weather. It's loading the dice to make these sort of extreme events be more common.
The town of Lytton, 250 kilometers northeast of Vancouver, has sustained structural damage, and 90% of the village is burned, including the center of town, according to local MP Brad Viss. Now, evacuation notices were issued for large swathes of a California county where a large fire has engulfed nearly 20,000 acres, with less than 20% contained by Friday, this according to local authorities. The fire has been blazing for a week after it was ignited by a bolt of lightning, a government fire alert service said. A dozen different fires have been reported across California, which was hit by some of the worst wildfires in its history last year. British Columbia has recorded 62 new fires in the past 24 hours. That is according to Premier John Horgan in a press conference.
Now, in other news, tourists and locals alike take advantage of Missoula Pools, the river, and the shade as Montana endures another blistering day in what locals call an early heat wave. Take a look.
It's early heat. Usually in August you get a couple 100-degree days, but it's definitely earlier than normal.
It's too hot. Montana's not supposed to be this hot. We were planning on 80 degrees and it's over 100, so it's kind of a challenge, but we'll come back though.
Like, to be able to swim comfortably in the river in June is not normal, because usually it's too cold to swim. Usually in June you just jump in and jump out. So the water is warm, it's low, and it's early.
The National Weather Service issued an excessive heat warning in some areas of the state, and millions of people in the northwestern United States were under heat alerts Wednesday as the region baked in record-breaking temperatures. And police reported scores of deaths likely linked to the scorching conditions. Climate change is causing record-setting temperatures to become more frequent. Globally, the decade to 2019 was the hottest recorded, and the 5 hottest years have all occurred within the last 5 years.
Meanwhile, Greece sizzled as temperatures topped 43 degrees Celsius or 109 degrees Fahrenheit, the year's hottest, with authorities warning the public to stay indoors if possible. Now, temperatures have remained high for 10 consecutive days, with the warmest weather expected in central Greece, according to the National Meteorological Service. Now, slightly higher temperatures had been recorded in July 2007 and 2000. In Athens, authorities have made air-conditioned malls or halls available to the homeless, elderly, and other vulnerable sections of the population. The Acropolis, one of the most visited tourist sites in the country, was shut during the afternoon as a precaution. Greece's civil service or civil protection has called for vigilance this week, in particular for the elderly and children who must hydrate regularly and avoid unnecessary sun exposure. There's also high risk of fire in several parts of the country, according to the agency. The fire department on Thursday said it was battling 3 notable blazes, the largest of them on the island of Crete. In July 1987, nearly 1,500 people died following one of the worst heat waves in Greek history.
Now, tens of millions of people in India were suffering under a severe heat wave that has pushed the temperature to a 9-year high in Delhi as monsoon rains run behind schedule. Heat waves have killed over 6,500 people in the world's second most populous nation since 2010. And scientists say climate change is making them harsher and more frequent. Daytime temperatures were above 40 degrees Celsius, or about 104 Fahrenheit, for the 4th consecutive day today across the states of Rajasthan, Haryana, and New Delhi. Large parts of Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh in central India were also wilting. New Delhi saw 43.1 degrees Celsius yesterday, the hottest July day in the city since 2012, when the capital sweltered under 43.5 degrees Celsius. Today, the temperature again shot up to 41 degrees Celsius in the city of 20 million. Temperatures have remained more than 7 degrees Celsius above normal for this time of the year, prompting India's Weather Office to classify it as severe extreme heat.
Meanwhile, snow covered the southern Brazilian city of Urupema. The sub-zero temperatures in southern Brazil come as a deadly heat wave slams Canada and the U.S. Take a look. According to the Information Center of Environmental Resources and Hydrometeorology of Santa Catarina, this is the first year since 2000 that such a meteorological event has been recorded. 3 consecutive days. Since the beginning of the week, the humidity and temperature conditions favored the appearance of snowflakes in the cities located in the region of the Santa Catarina Mountains. On Tuesday, there was light snowfall in São Joaquim, Urupema, and Urubici in the late afternoon, according to the EPAGRI and SERAM agencies. There were records of frozen rain in the region. The small flakes fell for about 25 minutes and were celebrated by residents and tourists in São Joaquim. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Protect yourself and loved ones. Use Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant that kills 500 strains of bacteria, fungi, and viruses such as coronavirus and other disease-causing microorganisms. Also potent against viruses in pets. It kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes. Dissolve 1 teaspoon in 1 liter of water. Apply on areas for disinfection or use it for misting. Protect Plus Gold.
Welcome back to the news. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte questioned the timing of Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao's allegation that corruption in government remains rampant. The president also dared the senator to name corrupt public officials to prove his claim. Pacquiao, responding to Duterte's challenge, mentioned the Department of Health as one of the corrupt government agencies. However, Pacquiao said that he is not attacking President Duterte, but merely helping him when he spoke about the alleged rampant corruption in the government. Take a look.
He has been with government for so long a time as a senator. My question to Pacquiao is, bakit ngayon ka lang nagsalita? Pero I expect him to sit in Congress, do not go anywhere, finish and find out the corruption that you are talking about. You know, when you are a champion in boxing, it doesn't mean to say that you are a champion in politics. So he's blubbering his mouth, tapos na. I am waiting for resort for the next department that he would choose to investigate. Gusto nga nila paalisin. Sabi ko, bigyan mo ako ng rason na paalisin ko ito si DOH. Wala akong nakitang kasalanan. Bakit ko tanggalin? against the advice of the many, even cabinet members, sabi ko, I will stick with the man na walang kasalanan and working only, doing his job.
Hindi ko inatake ang Pangulo. In fact, tinutulungan ko pa dahil sa korupsyon. Submit ko sa kanya yung mga partial na mga ebidensya at marami pang talagang nagbibigay sa akin na humingi ng tulong. At yun naman ay napapasalamat ako na makakaabot ito kay Presidente, yung mga ebidensya na yan.
Maybe para to maintain the equilibrium sa lahat, consider me a candidate for the vice presidency at this time. Posturing yan political posturing, so that they would not treat you badly. Kasi paalis na ako
Hindi ko sinasabing hindi at hindi naman ako nagdedeklara ngayon. I will declare in the right time kung ano tatakbuhan ko. At sa ngayon, focus ako sa aking narating na nalalapit na fight at hinihiling ko sa taong bayan na magkaisa po tayo.
Pacquiao, Duterte said, should carry the burden of identifying and investigating most or more corrupt officials. Duterte said he expects Pacquiao not to be absent and to start the investigation against the agencies accused of being involved in corrupt activities.
And there are increasing concerns about the Games becoming super spreader event, the Euro 2020, as the Delta variant of coronavirus fuels a rise in infections around Europe, especially for this upcoming said event, the Euro 2020 event. Janelle Kasuga is joining us live from our UK bureau. Hello, Janelle.
Hello, Alma. And yes, as the Euro 2020 heads towards its conclusion and ever larger crowds flock to matches, there are increasing concerns about Games becoming super spreader events as the Delta variant of coronavirus fuels a rise in infections around Europe. With vaccinations progressing fast across the continent and people eagerly anticipating the holiday season, it is tempting to view large crowds at European championship matches and gatherings in cities as a sign of life returning to normal. However, there are particular concerns about upcoming games in London and St. Petersburg, two cities particularly affected by the Delta variant. Friday's quarterfinal between Spain and Switzerland will go ahead in St. Petersburg, despite Russia dealing with a surge in virus cases and record daily deaths. Both semi-finals and the final will be played in London, with more than 60,000 fans allowed to attend the games at Wembley. The Delta variant has also been behind a steep upward curve in cases in the United Kingdom, but that did not stop authorities easing restrictions for England's last 16 win over Germany on Tuesday. Almost 42,000 fans were inside the 90,000-seat Wembley to witness the game, and the images of maskless England supporters wildly celebrated victory have caused some consternation. In England, excitement is growing that the national team could go on to win the European crown in front of its own supporters. European football's governing body told AFP all the remaining matches will go ahead according to the match schedule as planned. On Thursday, the World Health Organization warned new coronavirus cases across Europe had risen by 10% over the last week, after a previously long and steady decline. And the WHO admitted to fears that crowds at Euro 2020, which is being played in 11 countries for the first time, could be a contributing factor, saying host cities needed to do more to monitor the movement of spectators beyond stadiums. Most games in the tournament, postponed from last year because of the pandemic, have been played in front of severely restricted attendances. However, in Hungary's capital, Budapest, there were no restrictions on capacity, meaning a tournament high of nearly 56,000 spectators attended the host nation's match against France. Danish authorities reported that 3 supporters were infected by the Delta variant at their team games against Belgium in Copenhagen and urged 4,000 other fans to get tested. Finland's health authority reported nearly 100 cases among fans who had travelled across the border to attend their team's game against Russia in St. Petersburg. Public Health Scotland said nearly 2,000 cases were linked to people watching matches, 2/3 of the people who travelled to London for Scotland game against England. Back to you, Alma.
So how is the UEFA reacting or responding to this Eurogame matches that it may be a super spreader event?
Well, Dr. Daniel Koch, the UEFA's medical advisor, said that it cannot be totally excluded that events and gatherings could ultimately lead to some local increase in the numbers of cases, but that would not only apply to football matches, but also to any kind of situations that are not allowed as part of the easing measures decided by the competent local authorities. Koch also added that various intensive vaccination campaigns across Europe, as well as controls on European borders, can ensure that there will be no new big wave, and this in turn will not strain European health systems. Similarly, Flaholt believes that fans should not consider going to games in London or in St. Petersburg if they have not been vaccinated, and he also encourages those who do to avoid gatherings in bars, restaurants, or crowding on public transport. Alma?
All right. Thank you very much, Janelle. And looking forward to more updates on this upcoming Euro Games. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Janelle Kasuga. We live in interesting times.
In other news, the first international travelers touched down in the holiday hotspot of Phuket under a quarantine-free scheme as Thailand tries to reboot its battered tourism industry while also enduring its worst coronavirus outbreak. Here's Veronica Carino from our EBC Thailand Bureau to tell us more.
Hello, CJ. The first international travelers touched down Thursday in the holiday hotspot of Phuket under a quarantine-free scheme. The country is placing high hopes on much-needed tourism revival via the Sunbox, a model that allows vaccinated foreign travelers to visit without quarantine. Let's listen in to some reactions.
Et c'est embêtant de passer les vacances enfermé dans un hôtel pendant 15 jours. Et là, on n'est pas enfermé. Donc là, c'est quand même, c'est le top, voilà.
A real privilege and really happy. I'm happy to be able to bring my children home to their home country to be able to enjoy some lovely weather here in Phuket. Yeah, thank you so much. It takes a little bit of organising, but if you're prepared, it's very easy to go through the process. COE approval was very quick when you understood how to apply.
I will come to make a rest, make relaxing after 2 years without travel. And I like Phuket, that's why I choose Phuket exactly.
Launch of the quarantine-free scheme comes as Thailand grapples with its worst ever COVID-19 wave and the worrying detection of the Alpha and Delta coronavirus variants. Nationwide, the current case tally is at 264,834, but Phuket remains relatively unscathed as Thai authorities have rolled out a mass vaccination campaign in preparation for the quarantine-free arrivals, with 70% of residents receiving at least one dose. A total of 347 passengers on flights from Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Singapore landed on Thursday. Etihad Airways EY430 flight on the Abu Dhabi Phuket Suvarnabhumi route arrived at 10:20 a.m. with 44 passengers. 23 disembarked in Phuket while the rest went on to Suvarnabhumi. A command center will track foreign visitors' movement via mobile app, which tourists are required to install on arrival, and also monitor for potential outbreaks. Besides being fully vaccinated, tourists must remain in Phuket for a fortnight if they want to travel to the rest of Thailand and take 3 coronavirus tests during this period, a substantial expenditure for a family. Tourism makes up almost a fifth of the Thai economy, and the COVID-19 pandemic has led to its worst performance since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. The kingdom is pining high hopes for much-needed revival on the so-called Phuket Sandbox, a model that will allow vaccinated travelers to visit without quarantine. This update is from Bangkok Post. Back to you, CJ.
Thank you so much for your report coming out of Thailand. Please do take care, as you have reported the Delta variant and the Alpha variant there is going rampant. So please do take care, and thank you for your report again.
Thank you, CJ. And likewise, reporting live from Thailand, this is Veronica Carino, and we live in interesting times.
And Greece has launched its tourist season, lifting most remaining restrictions on movement. Here's Rowena Castro from our EBC Greece Bureau.
Summertime in Greece is when people start to go out and enjoy family bonding and being with friends. We are able once again to enjoy the summer in Greece because as of May 14, 2021, Greek authorities lifted certain restrictions and lockdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The mandatory SMS system of the citizen movement is still in place, which requires people to send a text message when they go shopping. Limitations related to essential reasons to leave home or exercise have also been removed. The curfew was removed as well, effective June 28. Some of the remaining restrictions being implemented by the government include the mandatory wearing of masks at all times in indoor spaces. Driver may only carry 2 passengers in their vehicles, except in the case of family with young children. Non-household members must wear a mask. Churches have strict social distancing quotas to follow. Neighborhood markets or laikis in Greek operate at 50% capacity. Gyms, wellness centers, and services have reopened since May 3. Access required to self-test and distancing protocols. Museums and conservatories have reopened with visitor quotas and protocols. Open-air archaeological sites are open again, but with strict protocol. Restaurants and bars reopened their outdoor spaces since May 3, currently with maximum 10 people per table depending on the space. Hairdresser, barbers, beauty, and nail salon reopened with mandatory wearing of masks and a limited number of people allowed inside. Organized beaches reopened since May 8 with health protocols. Self-tests are mandatory for employees. Sunbeds needs to be disinfected between customers. On July 1, 2021, the number of COVID-19 cases in Greece is 422,256. COVID-19 related deaths reported in the country since the pandemic began is 12,687 with 405,030 recoveries. Greece has administered close to 8.1 million doses of COVID vaccine so far, about 37.8% of country's population. Reporting for Eagle News International from Greece, I am Rowena Castro. We live in interesting times.
In other news, U.S. President Joe Biden hailed the resilience of families of people killed or missing in a collapsed Florida beachfront apartment building, spending hours comforting grieving relatives as rescuers suspended their work for much of the day due to dangerous conditions. Biden said there was still hope that some survivors could be found in the rubble, and while the families are very realistic, the president said he believed after talking with them that the rescue and recovery operations should continue. Take a look.
I just wanted to come down and say thanks. What you're doing here is incredible. Having to deal with the uncertainty and worrying about, the families. Good afternoon, folks. But the other reason I came down was to meet with the families. The whole nation is mourning with these families. They see it every day on television. They're going through hell. and those who survived the collapse, as well as those who are missing loved ones. Jill and I wanted them to know that we're with them and the country's with them. Our message today is that we're here for you as one nation, as one nation.
What's going on right now, which is ambiguous loss, it's the most difficult of all, the grieving. And until these families have closure and have some answers, no matter what it is, they're not going to be ready to begin the loss and the grieving and the mourning. And that's what makes it so difficult.
Biden and First Lady Jill Biden left the White House early for Surfside, saying they wanted to support first responders and comfort grieving relatives. Biden, whose first wife and daughter were killed in a car crash in 1972, shared his own personal tragedy with the Surfside families. President Biden noted that many of the victims' families mentioned potential causes such as rising sea levels and climate change. But he added, "I don't think there is at this point any definitive judgment as to why it collapsed." According to a BBC report on Wednesday, it emerged that residents had received a letter in April warning them of worsening structural damage to the building. Lawsuits are already being filed against over the disaster, with the latest accusing the block's building association of reckless and negligent conduct.
Meanwhile, Miami-Dade County Fire Chief Alan Kominsky said that the first responders heard audible sounds from a female voice during initial search and rescue efforts after the Champlain Towers South apartment building partially collapsed in Surfside, Florida. Take a look.
Unfortunately, during our initial search and rescue efforts, while we were working underneath the structure, the same structure that is significantly compromised right now, we did hear audible sounds, and they were searching for a female voice is what we heard for several hours, and eventually we didn't hear her voice anymore. We continued searching, and again, that's emphasizing the magnitude of what we're going through. The efforts that all our fire rescue personnel, everyone that's here on scene, trying to do the best we can in these heroic efforts. And yes, unfortunately, we didn't have success with that.
The search at the Surfside condominium building near Miami took a grim turn when authorities paused work amid fears the rest of the structure could also collapse. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Chief Alan Kominsky warned that there was a large column hanging from the structure that could fall and that movements in the ruins could cause additional failure of the building. The search resumed in the late afternoon after a review by structural engineers. Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava said, and the 18 confirmed dead so far include 2 children aged 4 and 10. She said late Wednesday, more than 140 others remain unaccounted for, and hopes of finding any alive are evaporating.
In other news, all U.S. and NATO troops have left Bagram Air Base, a U.S. defense official told AFP today, signaling the complete withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan was imminent. Local people fear for the future and express worry about the knock-on effect of the U.S. withdrawal on the local economy. For 2 decades, Bagram served as the nerve center for U.S. operations in Afghanistan, a sprawling mini city visited by hundreds of thousands of service members and contractors. It boasted swimming pools, cinemas and spas, and even a boardwalk featuring fast food outlets such as Burger King and Pizza Hut. It also has a prison that held thousands of Taliban and jihadist inmates over the years. Bagram was built by the United States for its Afghan ally during the Cold War in the 1950s as a bulwark against the Soviet Union in the north. Ironically, it became the staging point for the Soviet invasion of the country in 1979, and the Red Army expanded it significantly during their near-decade-long occupation. When Moscow pulled out, it became central to the raging civil war. It was reported that at one point, the Taliban controlled one end of the 3-kilometer runway and the opposition Northern Alliance the other. In recent months, Bagram has come under rocket attacks claimed by the jihadist Islamic State. If the Taliban capture the base, it would be a significant step, perhaps even the decisive one, towards seizing control of Kabul itself.
In other news, a new, smaller version of New York's Statue of Liberty arrived in Ellis Island from France, 135 years after the nation gifted its big sister to the United States. Take a look.
Today is a beautiful and very important day with the arrival of the little sister of the Statue of Liberty. It is a good opportunity to underline that the friendship between our two peoples, the American and the French people, remains something very dear to our hearts.
Sculpted in bronze, the new Lady Liberty stands 3 meters tall. It will remain on display at Ellis Island throughout the July 4 weekend and then travel to Washington, D.C., where it'll remain in the gardens of the French ambassador's residence for the next 10 years.
In other news, Canada's national holiday Thursday was marked by a grim reckoning over its colonial history after more than 1,000 unmarked graves were found near former boarding schools for Indigenous children. Several cities across the country canceled their traditional Canada Day celebrations, usually marked by fireworks and barbecues. The hashtag Cancel Canada Day was trending on social media, and rallies in support of the Indigenous community were held around the country. The 154th anniversary of the Canadian Confederation came one day after 182 unmarked graves were found near a former boarding school in British Columbia, where Indigenous children were forcibly assimilated. The discovery was the latest in a series that have outraged the country, with 751 similar graves found near a school in Marieville in western Saskatchewan province last week, and 215 found at the end of May at another school in Kamloops, British Columbia. Until the 1990s, some 150,000 Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis youngsters were forcibly enrolled in the 139 schools where students were physically and sexually abused by headmasters and teachers who stripped them of their culture and language. More than 4,000 died of disease and neglect in the schools, according to a commission of inquiry that concluded Canada had committed cultural genocide.
In a related news, police in Calgary, Canada, believe the vandalism of 10 churches in the city on Canada Day was done by people angered by the discovery of the unmarked graves at former residential schools. Vandals defaced the exterior of the buildings with orange and red paint overnight Wednesday, according to the Calgary Police Service in a press release. Now, one of the churches has a window smashed, so paint could also be thrown inside. Handprints, the number 215, and other markings suggest the vandalism was in response to the graves recently found at former residential schools, police said. Given the harm this chapter of our history has caused to Indigenous people in our community, it is understandable that emotions and tensions are running high. The police service says the dark legacy of the schools and the harm caused to Indigenous people cannot be forgotten. But it says the community has to come to terms with the past and find a path towards reconciliation. Alberta Premier Jason Kennedy called the vandalism of churches across Alberta appalling. On Wednesday, a Catholic church in Morinville near Edmonton burned to the ground, and that blaze is being treated as suspicious and is now under investigation.
In other news, Russia said it would not impose a new lockdown despite reporting a record number of coronavirus deaths for the fourth day in a row. A government tally showed 679 pandemic-related deaths in the previous 24 hours as Russia battles a surging outbreak driven by the highly infectious Delta variant and worsened by a lagging vaccination drive. Russia, the fifth worst-hit country in the world in terms of total cases, has refused to impose a full lockdown since the first wave of the pandemic last year. It continues to host mass events, including Euro 2020 football fixtures in St. Petersburg. The surge in infections prompted President Vladimir Putin again this week to urge Russians to get vaccinated in a televised phone-in session with the nation.
Johnson & Johnson's single-shot COVID-19 vaccine is effective against the highly contagious Delta variant, with an immune response lasting at least 8 months, according to the company today. The antibodies and immune system cells in the blood of 8 people vaccinated with the J&J jab effectively neutralized the Delta strain, which was first identified in India, according to researchers. A second study with 20 vaccinated patients at Boston's Beth Israel Medical Center had similar results. The data was sent to BioVix, a free online site for unpublished scientific preprints where authors are able to make their findings immediately available to the scientific community and receive feedback on draft manuscripts before they are submitted to journals, according to the site. The company in a statement said, "We believe that our vaccine offers durable protection against COVID-19 and elicits neutralizing activity against the Delta variant." That is according to Paul Stoffels, J&J's chief scientific officer. The Delta variant tore through in India in April and May and has since spread around the world. A report by the EU's Disease Control Agency, or ECDC, estimated that the more contagious strain could account for 90% of new cases in the EU by the end of August.
Meanwhile, Myanmar authorities imposed stay-at-home measures on the country's second city as coronavirus cases in the Kurak country surge, with many health workers striking to protest against the junta. Inhabitants of Mandalay, as well as 2 townships in the southern Bago region, woke up to new restrictions, banning more than 1 person leaving home for non-medical reasons. There was no time frame given for the new rules announced by the Health and Sports Ministry of the State Administration Council, as the junta calls itself. Those traveling to government jobs are exempted. The affected areas are home to more than 2 million people, according to a 2014 census, and join towns in western Chin state near the Indian border that have been locked down since May. Authorities reported more than 1,500 new cases on Thursday, up from around 100 per day in early June. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the February putsch, with more than 880 civilians killed in a crackdown and almost 6,500 arrested, according to a local monitoring group.
Back in the U.S., President Joe Biden will celebrate America's defeat of COVID-19 with a July 4th barbecue this Sunday, but the fireworks smoke will barely clear before the Democrats has to confront maybe even tougher challenges. Take a look.
With respect to the first goal of getting at least 1 shot to 70% of American adults, already we're at almost 90% for 65 and older, over 75% for 40 and older, and 70% for 30 and older. We will meet the 70% goal for ages 27 and older by the end of July 4th weekend, with a few extra weeks needed for the 18 to 26-year-olds to get vaccinated.
Now, President Biden's much-promoted goal of having 70% of U.S. adults receive at least 1 dose of vaccine by July 4 will narrowly miss. About 1,000 guests, emergency service and essential workers, military members, and their families are set to pour into the White House grounds for the kind of party unimaginable a year ago when the country was under lockdown. The Independence Day bash on the South Lawn, followed by a thunderous fireworks display on the National Mall, will allow President Biden to mark what he's calling independence from this virus. President Biden's to-do list features a staggering number of crises and headaches, ranging from climate change to handling a desperately divided Congress and a vengeful Donald Trump. At least for one humid Washington evening, though, the 76-year-old Biden will be able to kick back and celebrate. After leading the world in COVID deaths, more than 600,000, the U.S. has emerged as a model for getting the novel coronavirus under control and the economy back on track.
Back here in the Philippines now, where Malacanang expressed alarm over the World Bank report that over 80% of Filipino students fall below the minimum proficiency levels. This after the World Bank observed poor learning results among students in the Philippines. The World Bank said there is a crisis in Philippine education, which started pre-COVID-19 and have been made worse by the coronavirus pandemic. Take a look.
Well, that is very disturbing po and very alarming. And I'm sure Secretary Lynn Briones and her team at the Department of Education will sit down and study as well as discuss ways forward upon receiving this World Bank report. Pag po kayo mag-alala, pag-aaralan po mabuti natin kung ano yung sinasabi ng report at titignan po natin kung paano natin mababago ang ating curriculum, lalong-lalo na sa panahon po ng pandemya.
Across the three global assessments, the World Bank said only 10 to 22% of grade 4 and 4, 5, and 9 students in the Philippines posted scores at or above minimum proficiency. Despite this, Roque said he is confident that the Department of Education Secretary Leonor Briones will study and discuss ways to improve the quality of education in the country. Roque added that DepEd is introducing reforms in education to allow students to adapt to the new normal. On June 19, Duterte thumbed down DepEd's proposal to resume face-to-face classes, even in areas with a low risk of COVID-19 transmission due to the presence of a more infectious Delta coronavirus variant. The report was based on the three assessments the Philippines participated in: the Program for International Student in 2019, the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study in 2019, and the first cycle of the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics in 2019.
During the opening of the 18th OPEC and non-OPEC ministerial meeting, Angola's Minister of Mineral Resources and Petroleum, Diamantino Azevedo, says that the latest OPEC monthly oil market report projects a strong rebound of oil demand in the second half of the year. Let's listen in.
Global growth is now expected at 5.5% this year, from a contraction of 3.4% in 2020. The outlook for worldwide oil demand is also moving in the right direction and is now on course to grow by 6 million barrels per day in 2021 after its turbulent 9.3 million barrels day decline last year. The latest OPEC monthly oil market report projects a strong rebound of oil demand in the second half of the year, putting us within striking distance of pre-pandemic levels in the fourth quarter.
However, major oil-producing countries on Thursday failed to agree to boost output in August to meet growing demand and limit recent price rises, adjourning their meeting today. The 13 members of OPEC and 10 allies were expected to make a decision to continue to moderately increase output beyond July. The OPEC Plus grouping cut crude production after the pandemic sent oil prices crashing last year. But the group has slightly increased production since early May. Oil prices have recovered this week, reaching levels last seen in October 2018. Opening the talks earlier Thursday, Angolan Oil Minister Diamantino Azevedo, who currently holds the group's presidency, said that although oil demand was expected to rebound strongly in the second half of the year, it was no time to lower our guard. Azevedo added that the new Delta variant and recent surges in case numbers in numerous countries were a grim reminder of the uncertainties that still loom over us.
Automakers reported huge jumps in second quarter U.S. sales Thursday, but face a challenging summer as the global semiconductor shortage continues to plague the industry. General Motors and Toyota saw impressive increases compared with the same quarter of 2020, when large parts of the U.S. economy remained under tight COVID-19 restrictions. GM said U.S. sales soared 40% this spring to 688,236 units. GM chief economist Elaine Buchberg said the U.S. economy is accelerating. Consumer spending is robust and jobs are plentiful. The company also pointed to increases in sales of its Bolt electric vehicles, although the volumes remain tiny compared with total sales. GM this year has unveiled a series of major projects to boost electric vehicle capacity. But the U.S. auto giant's inventory stood at just 211,974 vehicles, depleted by 37% from the end of the first quarter. Inventories in June 2019 stood at 809,387. Automakers have been forced to dial back or alter production due to the semiconductor crunch, which analysts say is hitting sales as well.
A two-year break from boxing has left Philippine legend Manny Pacquiao hungry to get back in the ring for what could be the last fight of his career and a warm-up for a presidential rumble. Take a look.
I felt so hungry and again and excited to the fight. The feeling is like it's like my feeling when I was young, like early 20s. It's hard to say last fight, or it could be, or there's more. So I think one at a time, especially of my age, 42. If God will put me there, although I'm not declaring yet, I'm not I don't have a final decision yet, but if that's my destiny to become a president, first thing to do that I'm going to work out of my job is to build a mega prison, which is preparing for those, because I'm going to declare war against corruption. So I want, that's my only dream is to see them in the jail, all the corrupt politicians.
Time out. Okay na siya, no? Kapay na.
Finally, in our news, barrier-breaking woman aviator Wally Funk, 82, will join Jeff Bezos this month on the first crewed space flight for the billionaire's company Blue Origin, the firm announced yesterday. The trip is 60 years overdue for Funk, who was one of the Mercury 13, the first of women trained to fly to space from 1960 to 1961, but excluded because of their gender. Take a look.
Zero gravity for 4 minutes. You come back down, we land gently on the desert surface, we open the hatch, and you step outside. What's the first thing you say?
I will say, honey, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I'll give you a call. I've been flying forever, and I have 19,600 flying hours to fly. Private, commercial, instrument, flight engineer, airline transport, gliding, everything that the FAA has, I've got the license for. I can't tell people that are watching how fabulous I feel to have been picked by Blue Origin to go on this trip.
You're going to be an astronaut.
Oh, finally! Now,
By 20, she will become the oldest person ever to go to space when she takes part in the journey aboard the New Shepard launch vehicle, along with Bezos, his brother Mark, and one other traveler who paid $28 million at auction for the seat. The Bezos brothers and Funk, who was also the National Transportation Safety Board's first female air safety inspector and has logged 19,600 hours of flight time as a pilot, will be joined by the unnamed winner of the online auction who paid for a seat. Taking off from a desert in western Texas, the New Shepard trip will last 10 minutes, 4 of which passengers will spend above the Kármán line that marks the recognized boundary between Earth's atmosphere and space. The passengers will then be able to float weightlessly for a few minutes and observe the curvature of the Earth. Then the capsule will begin a free fall back to Earth, braked by 3 large parachutes and retro rockets before landing back in Texas. The oldest person to have traveled in space so far is U.S. astronaut John Glenn, who flew in 1998 at the age of 77 on the Space Shuttle Discovery.
Must be really exciting for her at 82.
Know. Great news to end our broadcast tonight. Again, that's it for the broadcast. I am CJ Hero. Please join us again tomorrow, 11 p.m. Philippine time.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.